Transition Age family, welcome yet again to another episode. Good evening, good morning, and good afternoon from wherever you are watching us. Thank you for coming. Today, yet again on the show, we have brought more for our youth. And today we have a very, very good friend of mine, a fellow servant of the Lord. He's a pastor, but a former. He will tell you all the crazy things he did when he was growing up. And please stay tuned and listen to what he has to say. Pastor Amon, you're welcome, sir.
Thank you. My name is Amon Bwenje. I come from a place called Ntungamo. It is in western Uganda. I am number 6 out of 11 children. And I am married to a beautiful woman, and we have 3 children, Elijah, Enoch, and Elaine. I trained as a lawyer, but I am by calling a pastor, and I'm very privileged to be with you this morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on where you're watching from.
Great. Thank you so much, first of all, Pastor Amon, for allowing to be featured on this show. Thank you for even hosting us. We are at Brook of Hope premises. Thank you so much for hosting my show here. Thank you, sir. Oh, yes. So, how was growing up like?
I grew up partly from a village and a semi-urban place. Where we grew up from, in the hills of Rutunguru, it's a deep village, and we grew up taking care of animals, and we had a banana plantation and crops. But then, come 1989, we transitioned from the village and we were going to a semi-urban place called Ntungamo. And that's where I began to study from. That's where I began my primary school. So growing up was environmentally merged, both from the urban, semi-urban, and rural. And so I learned things like taking care of animals, grazing animals, and going for grasshoppers in the mountains when would come December. Then I also learned, catching mudfish and being in those places, walking barefooted. I actually put on my first pair of shoes was slippers, just a pair of slippers, and that was at about the age of 12. Slippers were very serious things in those days. So I blend both the rural and then the semi-urban life. Why I call it semi-urban was because it was a township. It was emerging. You could not call it a city. It also had an emergence of 2 cultures, both rural and urban, and that's in Ntungamo town. So that's how I grew up. That's where I grew up from. And as I was growing up, definitely, when I come now to the town in Ntungamo, and I begin also to go to P1, P2, P3, I began to get excited about the town life. And in my backdrop, my father had, I would call it a lodge, and this is where people would come in to sleep. But also the local people that were into promiscuity would always bring in girls, would always bring in people's wives, would always bring in young children. And all these were before my eyes. My parents really loved us, and my parents they always spoke to us and said, you don't need to involve yourselves in any kind of sexual promiscuity because HIV/AIDS was at its peak. And anyone who had contracted HIV was really like the real recluse. You did not want to identify with them. I remember a particular man that was that had contracted HIV, and he was living in our neighborhood. He had come from Kampala, the city, and he had contracted HIV. So they brought him back to the village to die. It was called Babiesiza. And so he would be lying on a mat in the compound, and that where he was sleeping was where we would pass going to the well. But the fear for HIV was so strong that we did not have to pass by where Babiesiza was. You would actually pass almost like a kilometer far away from him to go to the well. So my parents told me and said, if you fornicate, if you're involved into sexual promiscuity, you will contract HIV/AIDS. And so I had that fear of HIV/AIDS deep within my heart, seeing Babiesiza, seeing some of my uncles die, seeing some of the people die. So while I wanted to involve myself in sexual promiscuity, I was stopped temporarily by the fear of HIV/AIDS. But then here is a community of fellow young people that are saying, man, go for it. Go. I'm now, because I come to Ntungamo at about the age P1, P2, P3, and when I come to about P5, that's at about the age of 12. Yeah, 12. At about the age of 12, you're beginning to come into your adolescent stage. And I really now began to feel like, but I'm big. I'm seeing men bring girls into this lodge here, this small place. I would see big men coming in with girls. I would see girls coming in with big men. So what I had been taught, the real fear of HIV/AIDS, was now being neutralized by the experiences that I was seeing. I mean, people are having sex. You're saying don't have sex, so what are you talking about? And then the friends around me, I remember I had a guy at school called Yasin. Yasin would tell us all these stories of the girls that he had gone to bed with. And I believe Yasin must have been lying sometimes. And then we had also some friends that would tell us stories. And if you were not involved with girls, if you are not involved in sexual promiscuity, you are not the man. But for the real guys, for the guys that were going ahead, they were dubbed the real, the real guys. So I approach my 13, 14, before I come into secondary, I am in the midst. I am not for promiscuity, but I am also not against it. My parents say, don't go for it. I see HIV and what it is doing. But then now I am seeing my friends, what they are doing, and I am also seeing at the lodge, and I'm like, I think I need to I need to see what to do, try out. So around that age of about 14, we are now going into the farewell dance, and in there, of course, I had gotten interested in some girls, and a few sexually involved, but then afraid that you've maybe contracted HIV, and your parents are saying you contract it, you're gone. So here comes a killer. Here I am sexually charged, because of course I'm now getting into my adolescent stage, and I want to express myself sexually. I am inhibited by the fear of HIV/AIDS, but I am motivated by the lodge and what's happening around it, and by my friends who are celebrated because they are into it. So while I am there now, and the pressure on the inside of growing up, the hormones, and you're being charged, you're now growing up, and you wake up in the morning, and when you wake up in the morning, one member went to bed when he's sleeping, but now you wake up when the member is up. And there's pressure within and without. So then I came across a magazine, one of the first tabloids in Uganda. When I read the stories in the magazine, I saw these guys that were celebrating escapades, sex, and I said, all along I'm here trying to control myself, because in those days, anything that came through the media was gospel truth. I would say these are the real guys. A magazine, and now they are saying, okay. And in there, so they were promoting. There was a sleazy story about this guy that had his way around babes, that would vibe them, and then they would warm up to him, and then he would finally take them to his crib, and he would have experiences with them, one after another. Now, Red Pepper was not yet around, but those were the beginning parts. That was, I think, a magazine that came before. There was Spice and Bella, and there was another one called Chick, and where I would see these gorgeous babes in loosely dressed. And as a young man, I mean, you just see. Yes. And you say, wow, now my parents, what you're telling me is nonsense. These guys seem to be having the real vibe. And so slowly by slowly, I'm edging away from the advice of my parents, and I'm beginning to incline to what the media is telling me and what my friends are telling me. And so around that time now, I discover, because now when I would read these things, they would charge me sexually, but I would not find a way to express myself sexually. Then I learned the first word called masturbation. And when I joined the senior one in St. Joseph's Vocational School, in the bathrooms of St. Joseph's, I tried out what the magazines had been telling me. And that was my initiation. At first, there were these small, little, petty sexual escapades, but now I get hooked onto porn, because now this paper would give me a rush for my money, a satisfaction, and masturbation would help complete the transaction. And then there was this music, which when they would play it, you would feel like, wow, your heart would all be warmed up. So so masturbation has come in. I begin to escape from school to go to River Wheezy to swim, but also to go and watch movies, because movies now were beginning to become an in thing. We didn't have a screen at home. So now I come to St. Joseph's, we're beginning to watch some movies over the weekend, and we would also escape to go to River Wheezy to actually watch movies. And while going there, that's when I began to meet with these guys, the movies. In those days, there were men like Ja Rule. There were guys like Tupac Shakur. The stop, open up shop. And I would see these guys in chains. I would see them dressed in a certain way. And I would see them smoking drugs, drinking liquor. And I would say, this is the cool thing. It's the cool thing, yo. You know what I'm talking about? And I trashed my parents' advice. I trashed my dream to become a lawyer. And I was following right in the footsteps of Ja Rule. I was following in the steps of Eminem. I was following in the footsteps of Tupac Shakur. And I began to move like that. Move. And actually, those were also the days of the Chakademas and Pliers and those guys. And so the dressing changed from the rural, semi-urban boy now being mentored by international artists. Struggling with masturbation, struggling with pornography. Now I'm beginning to escape from school. I am now on alcohol. I'm smoking cigarettes. And I begin to encounter some real hardcore pornographic movies. Because there would be times when behind the room, you know, there were the general movies we would watch at school, but there was also an exclusive room where when the young ones would go, the old would stay. So I am now brought into all these things. And I am slowly by slowly ebbing away from the advice. And so as early as senior 1, I earned my first suspension. And as early as senior 2, I received, at the end of senior 2, I was dismissed from the school. Expulsion. And I have learned all these habits that I've mentioned. Then I went back home to talk to my parents. They looked at me, they could not understand. My dad is struggling to pay the fees. My mom is a retired teacher, trying all to make ends meet. Life was actually difficult. What I forgot to say, life was difficult at home. Until I got to secondary, I didn't own my own mattress. I was sleeping on a small mat, and I was using a bed sheet that my father had accidentally bought, thinking it was purple, which was meant for school uniform. That was a bed sheet and a torn blanket. Life was difficult. And now my parents believed in me, sent me to school so that I could study. But now I am waxed in the influence of friends and in the influence of pornography and in the influence of alcohol and the influence of international artists. So it's now all these things weighing against my dream and against what my parents were teaching me not to do. And after I was dismissed from the first school, I went back home. Father looked at me, almost cried. My mother looked at me and said, "Son, I'm selling everything to educate you. Why are you doing this?" And father said, "Okay," took me to another school. And when I reached in that school in Kabale, Kigezi College, Butobere, that first time, yes. Not that my parents really had the money, but they had me at heart. And I had an aptitude for study, but now I had put my feet on a wrong path. So I come to Kigezi College, Butobere, and I am studying. And first few weeks, I find in the real guys, real company. Company now finds me. I find them. We begin to escape from school. We begin to escape from the school. We begin to go to the villages. We begin to drink money. And around that same time, when the term was coming to an end, students actually went to strike. They went to the village, they stole things. That day I didn't go. I must have been nursing a hangover, so I didn't go. And so when a list eventually came for all the bad students who needed to be dismissed, I was on that list. The police came and surrounded the whole school. I was supposed to be put on in the police car and taken to the cells. And I was carrying my mattress. They came, got the first people in the school, came, and somehow I managed to escape. And when they were coming now with that military car into the school, I was about to reach that main road. And then they had already arrested some of the guys, and I think some of the guys whom they were bringing back to school to identify who they had gone with, they were pointing at me. And before that car, it was called British Aid. It had that word British Aid. It was a Santana. And as they were turning it to come to me, I also found a truck on the road, and I stopped it. And I threw there my mattress. I threw there my suitcase, and I also sat there. So these guys come, and they realized to follow us would be a disaster, and I escaped, and I left. But when I went back, they had arrested all the friends, all the people in my crew, and I was actually on the wanted list of police in Kabale. So I go back home. I'm still young. I go back home. I tell my dad asks me and says, "Where's the report?" I say, "They said we'll pick the reports at the start of next term."
It was towards the end of the term?
Yeah, this was at the end of the term. Now I go into the holiday, I tell him we're picking the reports at the start of the next term. So I go now to my dad, gathers some money, and gives it to me and say, you go to school. Yes, for the next term. Now, one of the major mentors of my life that was taking me off the path was my brother called Alex. For him, he was senior in drinking. He was senior in womanizing. He was senior in all these things. So he was like my secret mentor. And so when I went, I told him, I said, Alex, they've dismissed me. What do we do? He said, okay. Scratched his head, said, okay, I'll take you to a school.
A different school.
A different school. And so that night, we drank. We were in cabaret. We drank the whole night. Bought some prostitutes and gave ourselves away and drank. This was fees, which my father had given to me now to pay in the school. But remember, being dismissed. And now I've asked my brother, what do we do? My brother says, don't worry. I'll take you to school. Yes, he's in school, but by that time, I think he must have been like in vacation or holiday. So he he was in vacation. He had finished senior 6 from a school in Fort Portal called NYAKASULA. We boarded a very early bus next day. We traveled all the way to Fort Portal, had never been there. And when we reached in Fort Portal, by that time, the money is almost halfway spent, fees. And my brother, who knew the town, was drunk in broad daylight, the one who had taken me to Fort Portal. And so I realized we could not go. So we spent again a night in the town. Meanwhile, we are spending the money drinking more. The next day, we come to NYAKASULA school. I did not pass by the gate. My brother took me through the fence. Said, throw your suitcase. I threw it in there. Said, throw your mattress. I threw them there. Said, you follow them. I followed them. Said, you also jump and go in. I jumped in. And said, he took me to a dormitory called Kasagama. And he said, from today, this is your dormitory. This is where you're going to be staying. We have not been admitted. And those were the days of allied democratic forces. They had burnt a school in the neighborhood called Kichwamba. So, this is a highly charged military area. Anyone they suspected, they could connect them to ADF. And now I'm in the school. He told me, said, that's your bed. I said, okay, sir. Meanwhile, he's drunk. He said, give me some of the money. I give him some more. And goes, drinks a little bit more. And said, now I've gone. Said, this is transport to take me back. He left me when I had 6,000 shillings. And so I asked him, I said, but sir, because that was Saturday. I said, but sir, now what do I do? Because Monday is coming, I have no uniform. Where do I go? He said, what you're going to do, the next day, on Monday, you go to Senior 3Z. The teachers will pass lists. You write your name on the list, and you are admitted. I said, okay. So I gave him some of the money that was remaining. He went to Fort Portal. I thought he had gone home. On Sunday night, he comes back more drunk. And I realized the 6,000, what I needed to do was to use it to make friends. So I gathered friends from the dormitory, and I took them to the village, bought them sugarcane and waraj. All of them came back drunk. That was the initiation into the school. On Monday, I borrowed, I had a white shirt, I borrowed something to put on, and I went to Senior 3Z. Eyes all red, and I registered my name on the list. And the trick worked, because eventually I performed well. They put me now into Senior 3Y, which was for fairly good performing students, and eventually I found myself on the class list. And I didn't pay money for that semester. So the problem comes when one day I escape from the school, and they get me outside, and they bring me to the headmaster's place to actually dismiss me, or give me a suspension. They said they asked for his file, for my file. They said, bring Amon's file. Did I have a file? I had no file. The head teacher asked me and said, who admitted you? But by that time, I had become a dormitory captain, and I had become a speaker of the school council.
Oh my God.
So, I'm now the speaker of the school council. I am feared and respected in the school. They had,
in senior 3 here?
yes, I'm in senior 3.
Z.
Yes, I've left Z. I have gone to the next class.
Why?
So they asked me and said, where is your file? I had no file, but I managed to make my way. I told one of the guys, I told him, I said, you know, I am a security operative. So, and as security operatives, we can't come in through the normal ways. So what you're going to do is to get me a file into the official archives of the school. And the guy said, okay, got a file, get me.
He
was
like
part of
the
the administration.
Okay.
And he got me a file. I intimidated him. And he accepted and got me a file. So I'm now in the school system. The next term, I come back, I'm in the system. I am supposed now to pay. Because now I have a bank slip, I'm in the system, I have a file. And around that same time, of course, I would be going out and in, drinking, doing everything. Waraji was cheap. There was an old woman called my goddess Solas who would give you waraji for free. Now, around that time, I had a friend of mine. He took me, actually, to drink. And he bought me alcohol, waraji. For him, he would never buy in glasses. He would buy in these big bottles, condoms in. And I drank and drank. Then he punched it with soda, with Mirinda Fruity, and I drank myself silly. Now that guy had always looked for an opportunity to beat me. Because he knew he could not beat me if I was sober. Because they all feared me, the whole school feared me. Because I had also done some martial arts training, and so they respected me and feared me. But he had always looked for an opportunity to beat me. So the day I was under the influence of waraji, Katenta got an opportunity. It is said, because I do not remember very well, that he did everything he wanted. After that, where we were drinking from was near a graveyard, and they pulled me and threw me into the graveyard. So I get sober after so many hours in the night, only to wake up and see a cross, see a grave, and see a cross, and see a grave. I have little strength. I said, I began to crawl out of the graveyard, going to the other side. And as I was getting out, then along the way, I managed to muster some strength and took myself into school. That was my lifestyle in the school. In the school, because UPDF was camped in the school, I was a speaker. I knew my ways around. I used to steal chicken from the school farm and goats.
Why were they camped in the school?
Because they had burnt a neighboring school. So now they were present. And I would go into this big, huge car, the mamba, the buffalo. I would get for them goats and get for them chickens, and we would feast. And would go and eat. I would steal them. I'm the one who would steal from the school farm. And the soldiers, of course, would be tired of posho. So people thought I was a soldier. The soldiers knew I was a big man in the school. Everyone in the school respected me, feared me, but was suspicious. They didn't know who I was. Here I am, young, barely 18 years old, far from about 400 kilometers away from home, with a sickly mother and a father that has sold everything to sponsor a child. And here I am in the midst of the greatest myriad of circumstances. And now the last stroke that broke the camel's back was when I spoke one evening. I'd come back from drinking. I was drunk. And I saw a certain girl called Charlotte. I said, Charlotte. Charlotte said yes. I said, Charlotte, I always see you moving around with things. I want you to give me things. Charlotte said, do you want things? I said, yes. Said, you come to our dorm. Things I didn't mean posho. I meant things. So Charlotte says, you come to our dorm. I said, Charlotte, you're joking. I will come. That night, I went to drink more. And at about 2 a.m., I said, now I'm going to the girls' dormitory. I'd been to the girls' dormitory several times, alone, looking for girls in the night under the influence of alcohol. But now.
You are going for sure.
And of course, pornography was still working in me. It would charge me, but I would fail to find ways to express the charge. So now Charlotte has said, you come. And now I went. I passed through the first gate, passed through the second fence and the third, managed to unlatch the door and entered into the dormitory. And I was like, Charlotte.
Did you know where her bed
I
was?
didn't know. I had no idea. I said, Charlotte, Charlotte, Charlotte. And she was not responding. Now, a certain girl that I had not made a deal with saw me. It was a strong girl from northern Uganda called Romlach. She grabbed a slasher and began to sound an alarm. And the girls also began to sound an alarm. Whoa! The whole girls' dorm was, and here I am, the alcohol which was now supporting me. And where I was charged now, everything left me, I normalized. Alcohol is a bad friend. Even sexual charge is a bad friend. When they are arresting you, they all leave you. They left.
Oh my God.
I said, now where do I go? Then I remembered the movies I had watched. Jack Chan, Jet Li, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Schwarzenegger. They would bang these things and the glasses would break. And I said, it's time now to test out. And I banged the glasses. When I banged the glasses cut me. You can see me here. These tendons, you can see these scars. These tendons were cut. This is my right tendon. All these tendons were cut and blood began to pour out. Is it? See, all this was cut. And this, I also have many other marks here. And this one, you saw it. All this was cut. And this tendon, this major supplier of blood here, was also cut into 2 pieces. And also here. And blood was gushing out like water from a tap. And so meanwhile, UPDF had taken position. The girls were screaming. They knew ADF had attacked. But just a 17-year-old boy that forgot the father's advice and mother's advice. Just a 17-year-old boy who has been charged by pornography and now wants to find sexual expression. Just a 17-year-old boy that has been wrongly motivated by friends and that have caused him to turn away from the right path. And now here I was going to meet an early grave at the age of 17.